He sat alone every morning, same table, same black coffee, same silence. No one noticed him. No one asked, until one day a waitress smiled and said, "Good morning, Mr. Cole." She didn't know he was a billionaire. She didn't know he'd lost everything. She just remembered his name. And that one small act would go on to change both their lives forever. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken. And one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. The bell above the diner door jingled, just once, soft and familiar, right on time. 8 to 10 a.m. every morning, without fail. Ellie glanced up from behind the counter, already knowing who it was. She didn't need to see the face. She recognized the rhythm of his steps, the quiet way he pushed the door open, how he never quite made eye contact with anyone. There he was. Same black hoodie pulled over his cap. Same dark jeans. Same corner booth, table 6. He didn't wait for a menu. Never did. He sat down, slid his hands into the front pocket of his hoodie, and stared out the fogged-up window. He wasn't like the regulars who joked or left flirty tips. He didn't chat, didn't smile, didn't even bring a phone or book. Just sat, still and silent, like a ghost haunting the edge of the morning rush. But Ellie knew him. Not really, of course. Not his story. Not his pain. But enough. Enough to notice he only ever drank coffee. No sugar, no cream. Enough to know he always left exactly $2 on the table. Cash. Enough to know that when she said his name, "Good morning, Mr. Cole," his fingers always twitched slightly, like her words struck a nerve he didn't want to show. He had never told her his name. It was printed once faintly, on the side of his hotel rewards card when he paid with it on his first visit months ago. Logan Cole. She never called him Logan. She could tell he didn't want that kind of familiarity. But Mr. Cole, that he tolerated. And over time, Ellie could tell. He liked it, not because it was respectful, but because she used it like he mattered, like he existed. "Coffee, Mr. Cole?" she said now, stepping up to his booth with the warmest smile she could manage after a 6 a.m. start. He nodded once. She poured. He didn't look up, but he did say quietly, "Thanks." That was new. Ellie gave a little nod and walked away, but kept her eye on him. Not in a flirty way, not even in a he's mysterious way, just in the way that people do when they've silently adopted someone. When they've decided, without needing permission, that this person deserves kindness, whether or not they ask for it, because Ellie knew something about silence. She knew what it meant to go unseen. She'd been waiting tables for 4 years, ever since her dad left and her mom got sick. She'd heard her name 1,000 times a day, but only from people who wanted something from her. But Mr. Cole, he never asked for anything, and maybe that was what made her care so much. He wasn't just a regular. He was hers, and though he didn't know it yet, she was about to change his life. Just by remembering his name, there were dozens of customers every morning. Tourists, locals, truckers, sleep-deprived college kids. Some friendly, some rude. Some who snapped their fingers at Ellie like she was invisible. But she didn't forget their names. It was a rule she'd made for herself. Everyone deserves to be seen, so she wrote their names in her tiny pocket notebook, next to their regular orders. Not because it was her job, but because it was human. And Mr. Cole, he was different. He never wanted to be seen, but she saw him anyway. Most mornings, Mr. Cole barely said 5 words. He'd nod, sip his coffee, stare at the same spot on the window where condensation gathered like tired little ghosts, always alone, always early, always guarded. Ellie didn't mind. In fact, she understood it more than he knew. At 23, she had learned what it meant to move through life. Quietly, like your voice didn't matter. When her father walked out, her mother stopped smiling. When the bills piled up, Ellie stopped asking for help. When she dropped out of college to work 2 jobs, people stopped calling. But at the diner, she had a superpower, kindness. And that's what she gave to Mr. Cole. 1 coffee at a time. That Tuesday morning, a group of office types filled the table next to his booth, loud, joking. And one of them bumped into his chair on the way out and muttered, "My bad, man." Mr. Cole didn't respond, just kept staring. The group left. laughed their way into a BMW, gone. Ellie noticed the way Mr. Cole's jaw clenched just slightly. She walked over, gently refilled his cup and said, not loudly but clearly, "You okay, Mr. Cole?" He blinked slowly, like the words had pulled him out of a deep place. Then he said the softest thing she'd ever heard from him. "You remember my name?" Ellie froze, the coffee pot still in her hand. She smiled. "Of course I do." He looked down at the cup, then back up at her. His eyes were glassy, not teary, not dramatic, but as if someone had finally wiped a window clean after a long storm. "No one said my name in months," he said. Ellie's chest tightened. She wanted to ask why, but something told her not to. He wasn't ready. And he didn't need her curiosity. He needed her presence. So she said the only thing that felt right. "Well, I say it every morning. And I'll say it tomorrow too." He didn't respond. But he didn't look away either. For the first time, he stayed in the moment, fully, like he wasn't just occupying the seat but being part of the world around it. Ellie walked away smiling, because she hadn't done anything special. She hadn't solved a problem or rescued anyone. She just remembered a name. But sometimes, that's exactly what saves someone. The rain came down sideways, that morning, hard, relentless. The kind of rain that blurred windshields, soaked through umbrellas, and made the diner windows cry tiny rivers down the glass. Inside the Sunshine Diner, everything felt dimmer, quieter, like the storm had muffled the world outside. Ellie was 20 minutes into her shift, her apron already damp from the run across the parking lot, her sneakers squished with every step. She tucked a few damp strands of hair behind her ear and tried to smile as she poured coffee. For table 4. But something felt off, something missing. Her eyes flicked toward table 6. Empty. She blinked, surprised at the knot that instantly formed in her stomach. He's probably just late. But Mr. Cole was never late. 8 and 10 came and went. By 8:30, she'd checked the door 5 times. By 8:40, she caught herself watching the rain with too much intensity, like she might somehow will him to appear. At 9 and 2, Ellie found herself pouring his usual cup anyway, as if his presence might magically fill the booth if the coffee was waiting. But he didn't come. She told herself not to care. He was a customer, a quiet one, a stranger really. She didn't even know his real story. But the worry wouldn't let go. Maybe he's sick. Maybe something happened. Maybe he's not coming back. She shook the thought away. Still, as the morning crowd trickled in, damp and grumpy, Ellie found herself glancing at the door more than usual. Every time it opened, her heart jumped. Every time it wasn't him, it sank. Around 10:15, with a lull in customers, she found herself standing by table 6, staring at the rain sliding down the window. She imagined him out there somewhere, soaked and silent just as he was the day he first came in. She imagined him walking alone, hood pulled up, grieving something unspoken. And the strangest thing happened. She missed him, missed his quiet nod, his eyes that spoke more than his mouth ever did, the slight twitch in his jaw when she said his name, the way he reminded her, quietly and unknowingly, that presence mattered more than conversation. Martha, the older waitress with hair like cotton candy and a voice like gravel, shuffled over beside her. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. Ellie nodded. "Yeah, just someone didn't show today." Martha glanced at the empty booth and smirked. "Ah, mysterious table 6. Ellie smiled faintly. "He's not that mysterious." Martha chuckled. "Honey, he's been coming in here for 5 months and hasn't ordered anything but black coffee. If that's not mysterious, I don't know what is." Ellie looked back at the window. "I think he just needed somewhere to go." Martha looked at her for a moment, then patted her arm gently. "We all do." That afternoon, Ellie poured out the untouched cup of coffee. Her hands hesitated over the sink. She stared into the swirl of black liquid and whispered, "Please be okay." She didn't know why she said it aloud. Maybe it made it feel more real. Or maybe, deep down, she was sending it out to wherever he was, like a tiny signal through the storm. That night, as thunder cracked above her apartment and the city flickered under lightning, Ellie couldn't sleep. She thought of Mr. Cole, and for the first time since he walked into her world, she realized she didn't just know his name. He knew hers too, and maybe that meant more than either of them understood. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still pale with leftover clouds, and the streets were slick with puddles, reflecting slow-moving cars and early risers. Inside the Sunshine Diner, the bell above the door jingled again. It was 8:19 a.m. 9 minutes later than usual. Ellie didn't look up. Right away, she was refilling sugar jars, trying to act like she wasn't glancing at the door every 30 seconds. But then she heard it, the soft scrape of chair legs against the floor. A table 6. She turned. He was back, and he looked worse. His hoodie was still soaked at the edges, his jeans muddy, like he'd slept somewhere that hadn't protected him from the storm. His eyes, those eyes, were heavier than before, red-rimmed, hollowed, like he hadn't slept at all. He sat down slowly, not meeting anyone's gaze, and rested his arms on the table, like even that required effort. Ellie didn't say anything at first. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and approached like you'd approach a wild animal, gently, respectfully, with care. She slid a fresh cup of coffee onto the table. He looked at it, then looked at her. Their eyes met. She said nothing, just smiled. A soft, "I'm glad you're here" kind of smile. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. But the way his throat worked as he swallowed, the way his fingers curled around the mug like it was a lifeline, it said enough. After a long moment, he finally whispered, voice low and shaky, "You noticed I was gone?" Ellie sat down on the edge of the booth across from him. "Not all the way. Just enough to be with him." "Of course I did," she said gently. His eyes dropped to the coffee. "Most people wouldn't." "Well, I'm not most people." He let out the ghost of a laugh. It wasn't joyful, not yet, but it was the sound of something waking up. Ellie watched him for a beat longer, then added, "I almost saved your seat yesterday, just in case." He looked at her like she'd said something sacred. Then he said, "You're the only person who says my name anymore." Her smile faltered for a second, not because she was surprised, but because hearing it aloud hurt more than she expected. So she said it again. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." His eyes shimmered. Then he did something he hadn't done in 5 months. He reached for the sugar, stirred his coffee, took a sip, and didn't look away later. As Ellie wiped down a nearby table, Martha leaned over and muttered with a knowing grin, "So mysterious table 6 returns." Ellie didn't answer. She just smiled to herself. Because he wasn't mysterious anymore. He was starting to become real. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to come back to life. Mr. Cole came in every day that week, always table 6, always quiet. But now there were little changes. He stirred his coffee instead of letting it go cold. He nodded when Ellie said hello. He looked up when someone opened the door. Tiny cracks forming in the wall he'd built. But on Friday, something happened. It was nearly closing time. Ellie was wiping the last table near the window, the late autumn sun painting streaks of orange across the diner floor. Mr. Cole stood up after finishing his coffee, no food, as usual, and walked toward the door. Then he paused. He turned back. Ellie glanced up from her rag, surprised. His hand was in his coat pocket. He muttered, pulling something out. "I didn't leave a tip." "That's okay," she said automatically, smiling. "You never do." He flinched slightly, then held out a small, folded envelope. "No," he said, "I didn't leave this." Ellie froze, glancing between the envelope and his face. "I don't want it to be about money," she began. "It's not a tip," he interrupted gently. He pressed the envelope into her hand, eyes meeting hers, serious, steady. "It's a thank you." Then he turned and left before she could say another word. She stood there for a moment, confused. Then, curiosity winning out, she opened the envelope. Inside was a short note, written in tight, neat handwriting. "Ellie, you don't know me." "Not really. But you remembered my name when I had almost forgotten it myself. That mattered more than I can explain. I lost my wife 3 months ago. The day I first came here was the day I buried her. You didn't know, but you were kind. Every day, every time. And you saved me from something I didn't know I needed saving from. I can't give you back what you've given me, but I hope this helps, even a little." Taped to the back of the note was a check. $5,000. Ellie stared at it, stunned. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the money, but because of the words, because of what it meant. All this time, she had been helping him grieve, just by being herself, just by remembering, just by caring. She folded the note carefully and tucked it close to her chest, artful and trembling. She didn't need a tip, but this wasn't a tip. It was a thank you. And that meant everything. The next day, the sky was overcast. Not quite raining, but the kind of gray that made you carry an umbrella just in case. Mr. Cole didn't come to the diner. Ellie noticed right away. She pretended not to, focusing on pouring coffee and smiling at customers, but every time the door chimed, her eyes darted to table 6, empty, still, by 11 a.m. She couldn't take it anymore. "Martha," she said quietly, "I'm taking my break early." Martha blinked. "You okay, hon?" Ellie nodded. "I just need some air." She didn't know exactly where she was going, just that she needed to go. And for some reason her feet carried her west, toward the edge of downtown, past the bookstore with the creaky steps, past the florist who always gave her leftover daisies, past the park with the cracked fountain that hadn't worked in years. And there she saw him, Mr. Cole, sitting alone on a weather-worn bench beneath a tree just beginning to lose its leaves. His coat was zipped halfway, but he looked cold, small somehow, like a man still lost in a world that kept spinning without him. He didn't notice her at first. Ellie approached slowly, gently, like she had that first day in the diner. "Mr. Cole," she said softly. He turned. His eyes widened, just for a second. "You found me." "I wasn't looking," she replied. "Just walking." He nodded slowly. "That's what I do now. Walk. Nowhere in particular. Just away from things." Ellie sat down beside him. They sat in silence for a few moments, just the wind rustling leaves around their feet. Then he said, without looking at her, "I used to come here with her, my wife." Ellie didn't speak. She just listened. She loved this park. Said the trees reminded her that even when things die, something always comes back. He closed his eyes briefly. "I haven't believed that. Not since the funeral." More silence. Then Ellie said gently, "She sounds like someone who saw the beauty in everything." "She was," he whispered. "Even in me." His voice cracked. Ellie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "I brought muffins," she said, trying to keep it light. "Blueberry. From the diner." He looked at the bag. Then at her. "You walked all this way? For muffins?" She shrugged with a soft smile. "No, I walked all this way for you." Mr. Cole stared at her, then looked away, blinking quickly. He took the bag from her hands, held it carefully, and said, "Thank you for showing up." Ellie looked at him and replied simply, "Thank you for letting me." They sat like that for a while, two people on a bench, sharing silence and grief and blueberry muffins. It wasn't a walk to nowhere after all. It was a walk to something, to healing, to being seen. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon when Ellie's manager, Martha, called her into the back office. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron and stepped through the beaded curtain. Curious. Martha was holding an envelope. "You got mail," she said with a raised eyebrow. "Real mail. Not a bill or a coupon." Ellie took it, puzzled. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with gold lettering that read, "Carrington Foundation." "Is this real?" she asked aloud, more to herself. Martha leaned closer. "Only one way to find out." Inside the envelope was a letter, a formal one, with elegant phrasing and official headers, but the heart of it said, "You've been recommended for a hospitality and management fellowship through the Carrington Foundation. One candidate is chosen each quarter for a full scholarship and mentorship program. We'd like to interview you this Thursday." Ellie's hands trembled. Martha had to sit her down. "This is big, honey." Ellie shook her head. "I never applied for anything like this. I mean, this must be a mistake." Then she saw the note tucked beneath the letter. A single handwritten line. "You gave me kindness. Let me return the favor." "Ah," her heart skipped. Mr. Cole." The next few days were a blur. Martha lent her a blazer. Ellie borrowed shoes from a cousin. She watched YouTube videos about how to sit, how to talk, how to answer "What's your biggest weakness?" without crying. But deep down she was terrified, not of failing, but of finally being seen. And maybe not being enough. On Thursday morning, she stood in front of the glass tower where the Carrington Foundation was headquartered. She smoothed her hair, took a breath, and walked in. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and power. She checked in at the desk, was led to an elevator, and then into a conference room where 3 people sat, 1 woman and 2 men, all in suits that cost more than her rent. She smiled, shaky but real. "Miss Ellie Monroe," one of them said warmly. "Welcome." They asked her about work ethic, about the diner, about how she handles pressure and late shifts and rude customers. But the moment everything shifted was when the woman leaned forward and asked, "Why hospitality?" Ellie blinked, then quietly replied, "Because I've learned that sometimes the smallest kindness can save a person's life. Even just remembering someone's name can pull them back from a very dark place." She paused, gathering herself. "I didn't go to college. I've never run a business. But I've cleaned spills while crying babies screamed. I've covered shifts with the flu. I've calmed angry customers and fed strangers who couldn't pay." She looked up, voice steady now. "I don't know how to run a hotel. Not yet, but I know how to serve people. I know how to care." The room was silent for a moment. Then the woman smiled. "Thank you, Ellie." When Ellie left the building, she wasn't sure if she'd nailed it or completely bombed it. But what she did know was this: she'd finally shared her truth. And sometimes that's what opens the right doors. It had been 3 days. 3 long days since Ellie walked out of the glass doors of the Carrington Foundation, with hope in her chest and doubt clinging to her ankles. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt, but it was always something else: shift reminders, bills, a "we miss you" text from her old high school friend trying to sell essential oils. The waiting gnawed at her, not just because she wanted the job, but because, for the first time, she'd dared to dream bigger than tip jars and backaches. It was Sunday afternoon when the call came. The diner was slow. Rain tapped lazily against the windows. Ellie was wiping down the dessert fridge when her phone lit up. A known number. She froze, then answered. "Hello?" A kind voice greeted her, professional but warm. It was the woman from the panel, Miss Dalton. "Ellie Monroe?" she asked. "Yes." There was a pause, then, "We'd like to offer you the fellowship." Ellie's knees buckled. She sat right down on the stool behind the counter. "I what?" "I got it." "You did," Ms. Dalton said. "Unanimous vote. And I want you to know, your story stayed with us." Ellie clutched the phone tighter, her throat thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. You said it all during the interview. You are what this program needs." Then came the details. A living stipend, professional training, one-on-one mentorship, and after 6 months, job placement with a Carrington partner company. It was everything Ellie never knew she was allowed to want. When she hung up, Martha found her still sitting on the stool, dazed. "You okay, hon?" Ellie laughed, wiped her eyes, and whispered, "I think my life just changed." That evening she returned to the park bench, just in case, and he was there. Mr. Cole, or maybe just Robert now. He looked better, cleaner, lighter, like someone who had finally let a little light back in. She didn't say a word, just sat beside him. He handed her a cup of coffee, no cream, 2 sugars, just how she liked it. She took a sip and smiled. "I got the call." "I know," he said gently. "I asked them to call on a Sunday." "Figured you'd need to hear it today." Ellie looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. "Why me?" He turned to her. "Because you remembered my name when I'd forgotten who I was." A breeze rustled the trees, and just like that, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, healing, hope. Not from billionaire to waitress, but from person to person. Ellie stood on the steps of her small apartment, cardboard boxes stacked behind her, a battered suitcase at her feet. The fellowship started in just 3 days. A new city, a new life, a chance she'd never imagined would be hers. But her heart felt complicated, because every beginning means something else has to end. She walked to the park one last time, half hoping and half afraid he'd be there. And he was. Mr. Cole, no, Robert, sat on their usual bench, watching the sunset filter through rust-colored trees. He looked up as she approached, offering that quiet smile she'd grown to recognize as something real. "You're leaving soon," he said. She nodded, sitting beside him. "Tomorrow morning." A pause settled between them. Not awkward, just full. Ellie looked down at her hands. I thought this would feel easier. Like I'd be sprinting towards something good. But instead I just feel like you're leaving something behind, he finished gently. She met his eyes. Yeah. Robert looked out at the horizon, where the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the distance. You're not just leaving, he said softly. You're becoming, and sometimes becoming means letting go. Ellie blinked back tears. I never expected you, you know. The quiet guy at table 6, who only ever ordered black coffee. He chuckled under his breath. And I never expected the waitress who would save me by simply remembering my name. She smiled at that, wiping her cheek with the sleeve of her jacket. You gonna be okay? She asked. Robert's eyes lingered on hers, steady, honest. I am now. They sat there a while longer, until Ellie stood. She offered him a small envelope. I wrote something, in case I couldn't find the words later. He took it, carefully tucking it into his coat. Then, to her surprise, he stood too, and from his pocket he pulled a small, elegant box. This is for you, he said. You don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to carry a piece of this place with you. Inside was a tiny gold pendant shaped like a name tag. On it, engraved simply, Ellie, the one who remembered. She gasped softly. It's beautiful. So are you, he said, almost too quietly. They hugged, and it wasn't dramatic, or romantic, or loud. It was something deeper, a hug full of thank yous, and maybe some days. And you changed me. As Ellie walked away that night, suitcase in hand, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because in her chest she carried every word they didn't say. And behind her on the bench they once shared, Robert sat with a smile. Knowing goodbyes aren't always the end. Sometimes they're just the start of a different kind of story. 5 years later, Ellie stood at the podium of a grand auditorium filled with hundreds of people. Spotlights warmed her skin, cameras clicked quietly in the back, and her heart thundered beneath her tailored blazer. The banner behind her read, Carrington Fellowship Graduation Ceremony, honoring future leaders in business, policy, and community. She never thought she'd be here, not as a guest, not even as a fellow, but as keynote speaker. She cleared her throat, smiled nervously, and began. There was a time, she said, when I thought remembering someone's name wasn't much, just a habit. A courtesy, a part of good service. Laughter rippled softly across the crowd. But one rainy morning, a man sat alone in my section, and when I said, "Good morning, Mr. Cole," something in him broke. She paused, her voice catching, and something in me opened. She told them the story of how kindness has no budget, how seeing people, truly seeing them, can shift the course of someone's life, and how a man with everything could still feel invisible until anyone remembered his name. After the applause, she stepped off the stage. Waiting quietly near the back exit was Robert. No cameras, no spotlight, just the same quiet smile. He didn't run the Carrington Foundation anymore. He'd passed the torch and taken on something more personal. He now helped train formerly unhoused individuals for careers. In the program's literature, it was called the Ellie Standard, based on a philosophy of treating everyone with dignity. He greeted her with open arms. You blew them away, he said softly. Ellie beamed. I almost didn't make it through. You did. You always do. She touched the pendant around her neck, still gleaming after all these years. He noticed, smiling. You know, he added, they wanted to rename the whole fellowship after you. Ellie blinked. What? They voted last month. Starting next year, it'll be called the Ellie Monroe Fellowship. She covered her mouth. I don't know what to say. Robert leaned in gently. You said it the day you remembered my name. Outside, the sun was shining, and as Ellie stepped into the light, past reporters and graduates and old friends, she realized. Her name used to be just ink on a receipt. Now, it was a symbol, a story, a reminder that a simple act, spoken with heart, can ripple into the world and rewrite a legacy, all because she saw someone, all because she cared, all because she remembered.